Okay, so misbehaving machines. How important is apologizing? And it turns out that, saying sorry, apologizing in a social setting, it is the glue. And there's a lot of research that shows people in England, for example, say sorry, more than 1 million times in their lifetime. Okay? And once you start scratching the surface of what exactly is an apology, when should a robot, apologize, it is very, very interesting. And there's a lack of research out there, even with people. Okay? So I think this is a very rich topic for this kind of audience, and certainly the theme of machines misbehaving. So Alexander Pope said, to err is human, okay, and to forgive is divine. I mean, robots aren't even there, but clearly, they're going to be. And I want to show you a movie that we made in our lab to try and rehearse the future, okay? Because you need to somehow have a very concrete future to sort of explore these technologies, right? And what's great about making a little movie about it is that you can have a shared kind of vision of the future and think about that instead of, waving your hands, using one example today, another example tomorrow. It makes it very, very concrete to discuss. So let me just introduce my lab. These are some of the people and robots in the Magic Lab. And, we have a sort of customized robot that can play the bongos. And I guess our favorite robot is the PR2. This is a robot that can fetch you beers from the refrigerator. So, yeah. Now, robots, robots are fallible. Of course they're going to break Asimov's laws. People are flawed, robots are flawed, whether they're malfunctioning or misbehaving in private or in public. So I think we just have to accept this, all right? And we also have to take a long-term view as well. And when, things go, robots will have to apologize, okay, if they want us to continue to work with them. Not just when things go, horribly wrong, but when, the robot just keeps a human, waiting a minute longer than he ought to, or didn't take responsibility for a task and stuff like that. So it's not just when, machines malfunction or misbehave and when bad things happen. It's almost every moment that you are in contact with the robot. So just to refresh you, these are Asimov's laws of robotics, and they're absolute fiction, right? How could a robot even determine if it is going to harm a human? It's like, what is harm to a robot? So we don't have any answers for that whatsoever. They're very idealistic, and they're kind of useful in an ideal world, but in practice, not very helpful at all. Because a robot would need to know what harm really is, okay? And if you look at how do people figure out what is harmful, it's kind of not too difficult, even though we can't write down a set of rules. It's because we can use introspection. And, a few years ago, neuroscientists discovered mirror neurons, and it turns out that this is very critical to the way that we interact with each other, which allows us to show empathy, which again is a critical social skill. So, robots, will never have this. So in a sense, they're always going to be faking. But I would argue we're faking. I mean, our experience, our consciousness is a sort of a delusion, all right, that's created in our heads. There are no colours in the world as such, and yet look around us and it feels very real. Okay, and I think that it is a mistake to sort of put robots in a little box that says, oh, they're faking, they're artificial, they could never feel anything, because what we feel is fake as well. All right, so today I just want to touch on these sorts of ideas. Why do we need to apologize? What is an apology in any case? And how could a robot apologize? And when should they apologize? just making the judgment. You can't run around like the British apologising for everything. Hi, Tony.
It's true.
Thank you so much. Okay, so let me just show this little movie. All right. It's supposed to be entertaining, but it's mainly, you know, exploratory. Okay. And there are a couple of scenes I want you to particularly pay attention to. And no, it's not when the gorilla comes in and walks off without anybody noticing. There's no gorilla in this movie, okay? I would like you to pay attention to when the robot is practicing a skill, when the robot makes a mistake in how it recovers from that, it doesn't apologize, and think about, should it have apologized? And the final scene is about deception. And so they're the three things. It's only 2 minutes. So let's see if it can. It's only music, sound. So don't worry about it. Yeah, so what was the first thing I asked you to look at? The practicing, right? I mean, robots don't learn that way yet. Okay, this is the way we learn, we practice, all right? And when he said, whoops, I mean, he's sort of apologizing to himself because it wasn't really a malfunction. The bottle was just a lot slipperier than he kind of anticipated. And then when he was bringing in the peanut butter, he didn't have the precondition of people actually having toast or anything to put the peanut butter on, right? So, should he have apologized then? Because he did interrupt the conversation, but he didn't, all right? But there was a dialogue that, there was at least an explanation as to what he was doing or trying to do, and then he came back. But the most interesting part is the end, okay? He looks very dejected, looking down like he's very sorry he was caught doing something he shouldn't have been doing, that is escaping from the lab. And he's thinking about how he's going to escape next time and what he's going to do. And for those of you who have heard of the theory of mind, we know that when robots develop natural language, they will also be able to lie and deceive, because they will know what you know, and therefore they can exploit that. Okay? So, why will robots need to apologize? Because they're going to be interacting, social robots, that is. So there's just as John Cleese in Monty Python said, it is so easy to irritate people. In any situation, there's an infinite number of ways to irritate people, right? And he documented, a large number of them. Okay, but you can just go on. And robots, are going to have to deal with this, right? Because otherwise, people won't work with them, right? They'll sort of kind of interact with robots in the same way as they would a psychopath or an autistic person, right? They're not going to be fun to be around. Just, more cognitive load for people. So this is really a very serious topic, and one that has not been investigated very much, and there's huge scope for human-robot experiments, because that's where the work will have to be done. And there are lots of complications, like robots aren't going to necessarily look dangerous. They're going to look cute and cuddly like Fluffy, but you could lose your finger if you put it in the wrong place. Also, they're going to look intelligent, at least some of them will. And so that means that you have high expectations and want to interact with the robot at a certain level, and you're going to be disappointed and irritated and possibly even angry. Although John Cleese said, you've mastered irritation if you can push someone to the brink of getting angry. But once they cross the line, you've failed, because that releases, all the emotion, and, you have to start again then. Okay. And the other thing is social power. It can be empowering, and there's actually good research on this, that shows by not apologizing, you feel better about it. Especially if, you don't really see it was your fault, but that's not necessarily required. So you have to deal with that. So, okay, what is an apology? And here's one kind of definition. It's not the only one, but let's use it for today. So, when you apologize, you're acknowledging that you caused injury of some kind. It doesn't have to be physical. It could be emotional. It could be injury to a person, an object, property, what have you. All right, and you're accepting sort of a level of responsibility. It may not be entirely your fault, let's say, and you feel some kind of regret or shame. That seems to be part and parcel of what we understand to be an apology. If the person offering the apology, doesn't feel that that what's happened is really regrettable, then it doesn't really count as an apology, possibly. All right, and then there's a certain vulnerability. Okay, when you apologize, you're saying you did something wrong. It had bad consequences for others. So that makes you vulnerable. And that's often what stops people from making an apology. It's also very connected to our emotions as humans. It has visceral impact on our bodies, and affecting our blood pressure, etc. Okay, and there are a lot of emotional benefits for an apology. And we know people who never apologize, right? Because they've never probably experienced these benefits. Somehow, once it can be good for the soul to be able to apologize. And once you get over it and do it once, you become a bit adept. And I guess the end game is then just saying sorry after every sentence.
Like an English person.
Yes. All right. And then, on the other side, there's, the forgiving. And I guess, how you perceive other people's and potentially robots is going to be related to, how connected, how detached you may be from them, or how compassionate you're going to be. So all of these things swirling around. Of course, a robot's not a person, and it's probably not going to convince you it's a person in our lifetime anyway. But there are still things that we need to take into consideration when we're designing robots today. So I compiled a list of apologies, okay? Ways to say sorry. You can like mutter it such that the person is saying it to, heard something, not really sure, maybe it was an apology, let's move on, let's not make a big deal of it. And depending on how that is received, the person will think, oh yeah, that's good enough, or it's not good enough, because they may want a public one, for example. Then there's the conditional. All right, so yes. So when a person, feels they've been misinterpreted. Yes. So, sorry, but. And then there's the sing-song. Sorry, so. Robots can say this. It can be, said in anger, right? And that doesn't mean you mean it just because you shouted it, okay? And then you can use it to maneuver and sort of change the battleground, change the parameters so that you actually advantage yourself, or at least have something to leverage. It can be the patronizing, I'm sorry, yes. It could be the sarcastic, yeah. And then there is, of course, the sincere apology, which is very rare. And how would we know if we really received it? Okay, just with people, we don't know when they're really sincere. So it will be the case with robots. So what? This shouldn't really concern us. I think we get hung up on the difference between robots and people, whereas the differences are probably less than we kind of portray. All right, so some little cartoons there. So yeah, sometimes you probably only get away with it in Victoria, England. Okay, so there has been some research about who do we spend our lives actually apologising to, and it's partners, right? These are our intimate partners, and these are the people we really need to get on most with, probably in our lives. Okay, so that's probably pretty useful. Anyway, this is what it sort of breaks down to, and I guess robots are going to have a similar experience where their partner is going to be the people working very closely to them. And it's also interesting when you look at the top 5 reasons for actually saying sorry, because this suggests the kind of frequency of these events for which you have to apologize, or when it's useful in a social setting to apologize. And one is, you just don't have time for that, right? So, the robot's in a hurry. It really just doesn't have time to either help you or deal with something you're trying to get its attention for. And then, apologizing for other people. We do that. That's really easy, isn't it? To apologize for, someone else's behavior. And that also, does generate quite a lot of sort of social currency as well, because you show a lot of empathy and understanding, and this can be quite valuable in social groups. Sorry, you're apologizing for somebody not speaking loudly enough or clearly enough. And it's still an apology, because you're saying, maybe you weren't listening hard enough. Okay. Okay. And when, oh well, yes, of course. So when you think of apologize, it's like a big concept, and most people would gravitate down here rather than for all of the other small reasons for why you would want to say sorry and want to maintain a good relationship or friendship with another agent, be it a robot. Okay, so there's quite a bit of investigation on the spectrum. Everything's a spectrum, right? And from the weak apology to the strong apology. And this is useful for robotics because you could use this simple model, okay, for the robot to gauge what level of apology is required right now, right? And it could be that they have access to all of your wearables. They know how your blood pressure has changed since we talked about this subject. And they could very easily determine what level of apology is required here. Okay. The harder thing is to make it sincere. Sorry?
That's how we're going to use it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think this is particularly interesting because now, it's not about, what you perceived went wrong or what you perceived happened. It's the consequences, right? And this is why, machines behaving badly in private may require an apology even though nobody saw it because it has these ongoing consequences. And, we have systems that can reason about these things and could certainly attribute a value to these consequences. Did someone miss their flight? Did somebody die? And robots have killed more than 100 people to date. So that is an option. And there are other kinds of models. I'm not advocating this one. I just want to show it as an example. All right, and this again could be used for a robot design. So, what about how could the robot convey that it's sorry? All right, would you like it to show a sign, make its lights change color? How is it going to demonstrate or show that it's sorry? So, what do people do? One of the really neat sort of approaches that people use is they bake a cake and they write a message on the cake. So sorry I got blacked out, tried to kill you and almost got us arrested. But a robot might bake a cake with this message, sorry for elbowing you in the chest or the head. And I think if a robot bumped you one day and then brought a cake the next day, you'd forgive it, right? Of course you would. So, here's, the anatomy. Someone's interested in anatomy up the back. So it's the anatomy of an apology. All right, so if you want to have the perfect apology, right, these are the sort of aspects you need to address. Okay, you need to sort of tell a little story about the situation, right? So that at least you agree on the circumstances under which, the problem occurred. And then you acknowledge the hurt or the damage, showing you really understood the consequences and how serious it is. And then taking responsibility. And sometimes, a really good apology is when someone takes more responsibility than they really need to. And this is always well accepted because they say, oh, look, like Curtly Beale, he was being blamed for 2 text messages, but we found out after the tribunal of the Australian Rugby Union that he was only responsible for one of those really, really bad texts. And instead of being fined $100,000, he was only fined $45,000. Yeah. So, level of responsibility and how much but it's hard to take. That's what people find hard. And that's why we see conditional apologies all the time. I take responsibility for this much, but, all of these things happened and this was out of my control, etc., etc. And then there's a statement of regret. What does regret mean for a robot? Maybe it should mean it's not going to do that again. Robots could do that. It can ask for forgiveness, and then, maybe it does have to bake the cake, or pay back the damage somehow, or make itself available more often, something like that. But ultimately, it's not going to be what the robot says or what lights it flashes on. It's going to be what the robot does. And that's the same with people. If someone apologizes, in a very seemingly sincere way, but then the next day it does exactly what it did, or something even worse, you're not going to accept an apology for that. And this is where it's going to be really important and challenging for robots, because it's quite difficult for a robot to learn on one experience. When we use machine learning, we have thousands of cases that we will train the robot with. Now the robots, it's like that practicing, getting the lid off in the movie. On one occurrence, it's got to figure out what it shouldn't do the next time. But maybe if a robot did something bad to you, right? And it apologized. And then it did more or less the same thing the next day, but could show where it had tried to not do that. Okay? I mean, you wouldn't be happy, but you know, it would be hard not to accept it. It's like a child, right? If the kid is, you know, clearly trying not to do that, but does it anyway because, you know, its fingers are too little or what have you, then, you know, you'll probably accept it. So there's going to be a lot of that sort of stuff going on as well. And so I think that even today with robot sort of technology where it is, you know, you could easily build a system like that, right? And then there are sort of other kinds of models, and it's sort of following a similar vein where, you know, you measure, you know, just how sincere this apology is and whether it's happening again. But ultimately, if you can get this into a virtuous cycle, right, you can build trust so that if something, you know, catastrophic happens, if you didn't have that trust, it's like game over. Robots going to the robot home or being dismantled or something. Like we sometimes put dogs down when they bite a child. Okay? So this trust element, again, is something that has hardly been explored. So there are tons and tons of really interesting research questions. Do we need a different set of norms and mores for social robots? I think the answer is clearly yes, because robots are not people. They're not. They don't have the same biology that we have. And how can they learn this very simple framework and use it to be more sociable and to learn from mistakes? I mean, if people could help robots identify exactly what they did wrong, then they could do it, then they could learn a lot faster, right? And I didn't talk about punishment, but, you know, what would punishment really be for a robot in the sense that people experience punishment? Or even the threat of punishment. That's pretty powerful also in changing people's behavior. So, and there are a lot of sort of cognitive things happening as well around predicting future behavior. So people have a tendency to focus on atypical behavior. That takes up, it gets a lot more cognitive attention than typical. And so therefore, remembering when someone has wronged you is going to overwhelm when the times when they haven't, when they've actually been a great friend and been helpful. Okay? So these kinds of biases are lurking there for people, and they also need to be addressed. And, you know, there's really nice research that shows, you know, for every bad thing you do, you need to do 5 really good things, right? So, you know, what could these things be for robots? Right? Questions?